If I were to ask you what one mistake caused Napoleon's downfall, you would probably answer with his invasion of Russia, of course. However, I would argue that Napoleon's invasion of Spain was equally crucial to his downfall. You see, anywhere between 200,000 and 300,000 troops had to be kept in Spain at all times because of the war. Now let's say Napoleon had an extra 100,000 men at Leipzig. He would have won easily. I contend that if Napoleon had never invaded Spain, he would have been able to defeat the War of the Sixth Coalition and rule Europe for the rest of his life. I'm about to tell you the story of Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Spain, which led to the downfall of one of the greatest conquerors the world has ever known, and changed the course of history forever. In 1805, Napoleon defeated a Russian-Austrian force at Austerlitz. In 1806, he beat the Prussians at Jena and Auerstadt, and in 1807, he defeated the Russians at Friedland. With that, his conquest of Europe was complete. Prussia maintained very little independence from France. Austria was defeated, and Russia was an ally. Sweden and Britain, of course, still defied him, but Russia was planning an invasion of Sweden, so soon Britain would be the only one left. Luckily, Napoleon had a cunning plan to defeat Britain. In 1806, right before Friedland, he announced that everybody in Europe who was an ally of France would stop trading with Britain. This would wreck Britain's economy and force them to negotiate. And pretty much every country kept trading with Britain in secret, they just wouldn't publicly announce it. Portugal, on the other hand, wasn't afraid of no France. France didn't own them, so they kept trading with Britain. And France just couldn't have that. Such an outright disrespect of French authority. So Spain and France invaded Portugal, occupying Lisbon without resistance. The Portuguese royal family fled to Brazil, escorted by the Royal Navy. With that, another country had been added to the long list of nations that had fallen to France. However, soon, Portugal would get a chance to win its independence back. You see, France had been occupying key positions in Spain, and the king's son had overthrown the King of Spain to become the King of Spain. Napoleon didn't like this inter-family dispute, so he invited both of the Spanish royals to France to mediate their differences. Immediately, both of these Spanish royals were coerced into abdicating, and Napoleon's brother was declared the King of France. With that, both countries were effectively puppets of France. The entire Iberian Peninsula was under French control for about 0.2 seconds before a rebellion started, because turns out the Spanish people didn't like the fact that their king wasn't Spanish. Hi, I'm King of Spain now. Any questions? Yes, you.
Yes, of all the countries on planet Earth, did you have to walk into mine?
Yes. Next.
How long will you be king?
As long as I live. Next.
How long will you be alive?
Hopefully a long time. Next.
Have you read Aesop's Fables?
Yes, I have. Why?
Well, I just think they teach valuable lessons we can learn. For example, the tortoise and the hare teaches you not to be cocky. The fox and the crow teaches you not to fall for flattery. The usurping French phony king and the angry Spanish mob teaches you not to take over countries. The fox and the crab teaches you to be happy with your lot.
So what was that last one?
The fox and the crab?
No, before that.
Oh, the usurping French phony king and the angry Spanish mob. Oh, wait, sorry. I thought I was reading a list of Aesop's Fables, but I accidentally put my diary in there. Sorry about that.
Alright, has anyone got any actual questions?
Yes.
Go on.
Get out of Spain.
Spanish peasants took up rifles and rose up all over the country. The Portuguese and Spanish generals ordered their men to open fire on the French forces in Iberia. British weapons started flowing into Spain to supply their war. A Spanish force stationed in Denmark mutinied against the French. 4,500 of them were recaptured, but 9,000 were evacuated by the Royal Navy and taken to Spain to continue the war against France. But worse news was yet to come. You see, Spain faced the French at the Battle of Bailen. And you'll never guess what Spain did at Bailen. They won! They actually beat France, everybody! Guys, did you know Spain just beat France? People have been trying to defeat France for years. Austria, Britain, Sweden, Russia, Prussia, the Italians, the Germans, everybody had tried and everyone had failed. But finally, Napoleon's empire lost the battle. That was big news. Everybody was talking about it. And worse news was yet to come. A British force arrived in Portugal, and a combined Portuguese-British force faced the French at the Battle of Vimeiro, and they won. Now that France had been beaten out of Portugal, the Portuguese and the British entered Spain to finish the job. But it looked like the Spanish had done that for them. In a matter of months, the French position in Spain had completely collapsed. They had been pushed back almost to the border, and Napoleon couldn't have it. So he put together a new army, to invade Spain, and this one was much more successful. So when Napoleon came in with his organised army under his central command, the Spanish didn't stand a chance. They were beaten bloody. Napoleon battered them from every angle, and pretty soon he retook Madrid. Luckily, the British general in Spain came up with a cunning plan to slow Napoleon's advance and give the Spanish a chance to withdraw. If Britain could get behind France and threaten their supply lines, Napoleon would be forced to double back on himself and go back north to stop the British, giving the Spanish a chance to recover. The plan worked. Napoleon left a garrison to defend Madrid and headed north to face the British. The British, outnumbered 2-1, had no choice but to flee. After a long and brutal forced march, in which British army discipline completely collapsed, they finally arrived on the Spanish coast. However, the evacuation ships that were going to save them hadn't arrived yet. It seemed that the British army was doomed. However, in the nick of time, one last ray of hope appeared for the British. Ever since Austria had been defeated in 1805, they had been plotting their revenge. They had been whipping their army into shape, taking a lot of inspiration from France. Then Britain agreed to launch a diversionary invasion of the Netherlands to draw French troops away from them, and Britain actually gave them a small subsidy to help fund the war. Napoleon received word that Austria was preparing for war, so he left for Germany to fight the Austrians. Marshal Soult was left in command of the French army in Spain and tasked with finishing off the British. Britain waited for the transports for 3 days before finally the boats arrived. And on the exact same day the boats arrived, so did France. The battle was on. France assaulted the British positions, and the battle lasted all day. During the battle, the general in charge of the British army was mortally wounded. Britain held out and evacuated in the middle of the night. Meanwhile in Austria, Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Aspern-Essling. Napoleon would of course get his revenge at Wagram. After Marshal Soult finished chasing the British out of Spain, he went south to invade Portugal, storming the key port of Porto, the second most important city in Portugal. 4 months earlier, the British had fled. Now, they were back again, and they signed an agreement with the Portuguese. Did I hear someone say ding ding, because it's time for round 2. The British and Portuguese army headed north, and Marshal Soult ordered his men to blow up all the boats along the river so the British couldn't cross. By the time the French response began, there was a sizable British force already across the river. The French were defeated handily. They lost over 4,000 men, when the Allies lost 500. Except the French, in their haste to flee, had abandoned their artillery and baggage to fall into British hands. With Portugal once again liberated, the Allies now planned an attack to take Madrid. The combined Allied force of 55,000 men was about to face battle against a French force of 22,000 men. Spain would attack first, and immediately after, the British attack would come. Arthur Wellesley, the British general, rose at 2 a.m. to get ready for this attack. But by 6 a.m, the Spanish attack had not yet come. So Wellesley rode over to the Spanish camp to see what was going on, only for Spain to tell them that the Spanish army hadn't done a good enough job of preparing for the attack, and were also too tired, so they couldn't attack that day. So the attack had to be called off, and the French were given a chance to escape. And not only that, but the Spanish army failed to prevent reinforcement from reaching the French. In the end, the Allies did win a battle against the French army between them and Madrid, but it wouldn't matter anyway. Soult came down from the north, threatening to encircle them, and they had to retreat. So for now, Madrid remained in French hands. However, a much bigger threat was now facing the Allied armies in Iberia. After pushing all the way to the Spanish coast and besieging Cadiz, France was launching yet another invasion of Portugal. 60,000 French troops marched across the border, headed straight for Lisbon. The British and Portuguese met them at Bucacau. France lost the battle, and it slowed their advance, but it soon became clear that the French were going to launch another attack. Alright, looks like the French are coming, so we'll need a plan. Has anyone got any bright ideas? Oh yes, or we should stand and fight. No, that is a terrible idea. You are fired. Get out of my office. What about you? You got anything smart to say? Okay, so my plan is, listen up. Alright, when the enemy approaches, and this is a very convoluted, complex strategy here, so you're going to have to pay really close attention if you want to understand it. Okay, right. When the enemy approaches, and I think the entire audience probably knows what I'm going to say, so I want you all to get ready, say it with me, take a breath. When the enemy approaches... As the Allies retreated towards Lisbon, they employed a scorched earth tactic. Anything that could possibly help the French invaders was burned. By the time the starving French reached the capital, they witnessed something that changed absolutely everything. Over the past year, the Allies had been constructing the lines of Torres Vedras, a line of impregnable fortresses around Lisbon. Wellesley had slowed the French down long enough to complete the fortification. The invaders were left with no hope of successfully attacking the city. They waited outside the walls for 6 months, hoping for a miracle, as 25,000 of their men starved to death. Eventually, they bowed to reality and withdrew. The French had found victory absolutely everywhere in Europe. All the great powers of Europe had tried to defeat them. Not even the mighty Russia had proved up to the task. Yet, in Iberia, it seemed that France had picked a fight she couldn't win. Anyway, Wellington defeated Marshal Massena at Almeida, and Soult relieved Badajoz. But still, worse news arrived for the French in Spain. Troops had been withdrawn from Spain to help invade Russia. Worse still, French troops had been redirected east to help the capture of land in the east. This left the Western Front very undefended. Badajoz quickly fell to the British, as did Ciudad Rodrigo. The Allies went on an offensive deep into French territory, where they were confronted by a French army roughly similar in size to their own, but the French suffered a massive casualty rate and were beaten bloody. And, for the first time in 5 years, France lost control of Madrid. Now that they were at risk of being cut off, the French armies in Spain had to break their siege on Cadiz and withdraw north. Large swaths of Spanish territory had now been liberated. However, Wellesley soon found himself at risk of being cut off and had to withdraw. Despite this retreat, the French position in Spain had been damaged irreparably. Remember that invasion of Russia I mentioned earlier? Napoleon lost almost his entire army in that invasion, leaving a whole empire wide open to attack. Russia marched into Warsaw, and Napoleon's Polish puppet state collapsed. Russian troops began passing through Prussian territory for an offensive against France. Prussia, Sweden and Mecklenburg all declared war on France. Austria declared neutrality. Mr. Bonaparte now faced the task of creating from nothing an army capable of saving his empire. And what do you know? He actually did it. Well, he didn't save his army, but he created himself an army capable of saving his empire. So he conscripted hundreds of thousands of men from France and withdrew 20,000 troops from Spain. Arguably, the best strategy would have been to withdraw to the Ebro River, but that didn't seem like an option. All of Napoleon's allies were switching sides or deserting him. If Napoleon withdrew too far, it could make him look weak and cause more people to abandon him. So, the war continued. Napoleon's brother, the King of Spain, withdrew from Madrid in the face of over 100,000 Spanish, British and Portuguese heading his way. They retook the capital, seized Burgos, and fought the heavily outnumbered French at the Battle of Vittoria. 4 columns hit the French from all sides. When the 4th column appeared to surround them, a retreat was immediately ordered. It was a disaster. French wagons blocked the roads, cutting off their forces from escape. Artillery guns were left there to be captured by the Allies. Now, the British army did stop to plunder the French baggage, which is why nearly the entire French army did manage to escape the battle alive at least. But it didn't matter. It had become clear by this point that the French position in Spain was completely untenable. As Austria joined the coalition against France, Napoleon was forced to withdraw yet more troops from Spain to fight the war in Germany. Wait, do you remember this guy Soult, who's appeared several times in this video now? Well, Napoleon's just put him in charge of all French troops in Spain, and he's launching a counter-offensive to relieve the besieged garrisons of Pamplona and San Sebastian. He wins some initial victories and gets within 10 miles of Pamplona before the British and Portuguese finally defeat him and send him packing. He fell to relieve either garrison. As San Sebastian and Pamplona fell, the Allies launched an attack across the Pyrenees and defeated Soult in a series of battles. Meanwhile in Germany, the Allies defeated Napoleon at the Great Battle of Leipzig. And with that, what was left of Napoleon's allies turned against him. The Allied armies crossed the Rhine, and Paris fell, as did Toulouse to the Allies in the south. Napoleon abdicated, and the war was over. But the consequences of this war would be severe. At the start of this war, Napoleon controlled most of South America and a lot of Central America. But while Spain was busy fighting France, all of these colonies declared independence. After the war, 30,000 Spanish troops were sent to take back the colonies. All 30,000 of these troops would die. In a matter of years, Spain lost control of effectively an entire continent. Could you imagine how differently history would have gone had Napoleon not invaded Spain, and Spain would have held on to South America for a lot longer? Don't get me wrong, those colonies would have gotten independence eventually, but Maybe America would want to annex part of it? I mean, would the Zimmerman telegram would have happened? Would Cuba be in the place it's in today with like communism and everything? If you're an old historian watching this video, please make that video, and I will eventually make a video about like Spain's wars of decolonization that I just mentioned. It'll probably be the next video on the channel, and when I do make it, I'll link it on the end screen now, but it's not linked at the moment there because I haven't made the video yet, but I will.